Okay. All right. So my name again, for those of you who maybe weren't here the past couple weeks, my name is Jen Boisvert. I'm a registered dietitian. I have a Master of Science degree in clinical nutrition. I'm currently working as a clinical inpatient dietitian at St. Joseph's Hospital in New Hampshire. And I have a C6 spinal cord injury from a car accident back in 2001. So today I'm going to talk about nutrition for neurogenic bowel dysfunction. I'll also touch a little bit on GI, just overall health too. So I'm going to start off on just giving a little overview on food's journey through our GI tract and how the large intestine works. I'll also talk about then neurogenic bowel dysfunction and tips on how to maybe improve constipation and diarrhea that may be associated with it, including which foods to consume or avoid. And then I'll kind of finish up. I'll just kind of go over the gut microbiome, which is just all the bacteria that live in our intestine and just how to optimize the health of those bacteria and gut microbiome. So, all right, I'll get started. Oops, let's see. It never wants to work on the first slide. All right, so food starts off, you swallow your food, it goes down the esophagus, then into the stomach, where most digestion occurs in the stomach. The stomach also kind of acts as a holding vessel for food. It's usually in there about 3 hours. Then it works its way into the small intestine, where more digestion occurs, and this is where the majority of absorption of nutrients occurs. And this takes about 3 to 6 hours or so on average. Then the food goes into the large intestine, which surrounds the small intestine. And this is where absorption of water and electrolytes occur. Electrolytes are like sodium, potassium, chloride. There's also digestion of fiber by bacteria in the large intestine. The synthesis of some vitamins like vitamin K and some of the B vitamins. And also the large intestine, it forms, it stores, and it eliminates stool. And this takes, on average, about 30 to 40 hours that food kind of travels through here. And it can take up to even 75 hours can be normal. All right, so let's see. So just a little quick anatomy of the large intestine. So it starts down here, there's the appendix, it connects to the small intestine, and then this is the colon. It starts with the ascending colon, then it kind of goes over the transverse colon, down the descending colon. And the colon is about 60 inches, it's a muscular tube. Then we have our rectum, which is 6 inches, and the anal canal is 1 to 2 inches, and we have 2 sphincters. We have an internal anal sphincter, which is smooth muscle, and that's involuntary control. And then an external anal sphincter, and that's skeletal muscle, so that's under voluntary control. All right, large intestine motility. So motility is just the movement of the large intestine. So we have some haustral contractions, and those are the chopping and mixing of chyme. So chyme is what we call, so once food has left the stomach and into the small intestine, it mixes with enzymes, bile, maybe other fluids, and we call it chyme at that point. So here you can see the chyme, and you kind of see the chopping and mixing of the smooth muscle cells of the intestine kind of chop and mix. So water and electrolytes come out of the large intestine into the body. Then we also have anti-peristaltic contractions. And that's similar, but it's the backwards moving of the chyme. And this just allows more time for electrolytes and water to be absorbed further. Then there's also mass movements. So these are intense prolonged contractions. And this kind of moves the stool to the rectum. And these happen about 3 to 4 times a day only. And they move the stool maybe about 8 to 10 inches each time. This does not usually occur at night while you're sleeping, but then when you wake up, that kind of can maybe stimulate a mass movement sometime. Also, it can be triggered by what they call a gastrocolic reflex. So that's when, food, the stomach, or even the beginning of the small intestine is distended from the food. It triggers one of these mass movements, and that's to allow room for new food to come on through. All right, I'll briefly go over the innervation. I find it very complicated. but I just kind of wanted to touch on it. So we have the enteric nervous system. That's involved in much of that motility that I just showed you, involves the enteric nervous system. Now, this is an interesting nervous system. It's part of the autonomic nervous system, but it can function independently. So it allows different parts of the GI tract to communicate with each other without going through the spinal cord. It can work independently of the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems, although it does appear that they influence the enteric nervous system. Also, we have parasympathetic nervous system innervation. So the vagus nerve, that controls the ascending and transverse colon. In the vagus nerve, that comes out of the cranial nerves up above, above the neck in the brain more. Then we have also it's controlled by pelvic splanchnic nerves of the parasympathetic nervous system. And those are way down here, S2 to S4. And that controls some of the descending colon and the rectum. The sympathetic nervous system is also involved. We have some nerves from T9 to L2 that control much of the movement in the ascending, transverse, and descending colon. Those are kind of right here, the thoracic to the sacral area. Then we also have another hypogastric nerve that's in the lumbar area, and that controls the descending colon, the rectum, and the sphincters. We also have somatic nervous system controls in the sacral area, S2 to S4. This is part of the somatic nervous system, which is, the motor and sensory nervous system of the skeletal muscles. And this controls the pelvic floor and the external anal sphincter. And I know this is pretty complex, but I just wanted to show you really how much the nervous system is involved in, a regular bowel movement. And, so you could see how any sort of impairment, neurological impairment, disease or disorder or injury can really affect our large intestine and our bowel health. So neurogenic bowel dysfunction, what is this? So this is defined as fecal incontinence or constipation resulting from a central nervous system disease or injury. So it could be spinal cord injury, ALS, spina bifida, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, stroke. There's probably some others too that I'm maybe leaving out. But it just affects a wide number of us. They say 95% of people with spinal cord injury report constipation. 75% have had episodes of fecal incontinence. 2/3 of people with MS experience constipation or fecal incontinence. The majority too, about 2/3 of people with spina bifida report problems with regularity bowel movements as well. Affects people with Parkinson's, and even some people, a smaller number, but even stroke patients are affected by this. So it's definitely pretty common. Okay, and I also wanted to show you this drawing here. So here's the large intestine again, and you can see when the chyme goes into the large intestine, it starts as fluid, then as it moves through, semi-fluid mush, because water's being absorbed into the body. So this is making the stool more solid, semi-solid, then eventually solid by the time it comes out. Now, if the chyme takes longer than a normal amount in here, this is going to be a slow transit time, and that's going to cause constipation because too much of that fluid is going to just keep being absorbed. So the stool is going to become hard and kind of lumpy and difficult to pass. On the other side of the coin, if things are moving too fast through here, there's not enough time for the water to be absorbed by the body. So rapid transit time equals diarrhea. All right, so I'm going to just start with constipation will be the first issue we talk about. So this can be defined as fewer than 3 bowel movements a week, stools that are hard, dry, or lumpy, or stools that are difficult or painful to pass, or feeling that not all the stool has passed. So what can we do about this? So there's a few things that we can try to have control over. Adequate fluid, adequate dietary fiber, and physical activity. All of these can hopefully help a little bit with constipation. So adequate fluid's the first thing we'll talk about. So adequate fluid, you need to have adequate fluid to prevent too much water from being absorbed out of the colon. And this will keep the stool moving and softer. Now, if you're dehydrated or don't have, enough fluid that you're drinking, your body needs that fluid to survive. So it's going to take it from the colon. And then that will slow down the transit time and make the stool kind of hard and lumpy. So the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, they recommend for people with neurogenic bowel dysfunction, they have two formulas they recommend. One is they recommend 1 milliliter per every calorie you eat, plus an additional 500 milliliters. So for example, say you consumed 1,500 calories a day. This would be 1,500 milliliters of fluid, plus an additional 500. So 2,000 milliliters a day, which is roughly 64 ounces of fluid. I have down here, 1 ounce equals about 30 milliliters. Another formula they recommend is 40 milliliters per kilogram of body weight plus 500 milliliters. So I don't know if you remember from last time, but 2.2 pounds equals 1 kilogram. So say the individual determined they weighed 60 kilograms. It would be 40 milliliters per kilogram times 60, which is 2,400, plus an additional 500 milliliters. So that comes out to 3,100 milliliters a day, which is maybe about like 95 ounces of fluid or so. So there's quite a difference between these two recommendations. So I guess you kind of have to find what works for you. And I understand too, for some of us, it can be a little difficult to drink this much fluid. Maybe, you have restrictions due to a bladder regimen, or maybe another health condition that, restricts how much fluid you can consume. So you kind of have to, weigh your options here with this and find out what can work for, what's the most fluid that can work for you. And all fluid counts, it's not just water. So fluid from, like say you're having soup, that has fluid, oatmeal, that has fluid, fruits, vegetables, all of those things contain fluid. So those can count toward your intake. I just have a couple of quick tips. So increase your fluid slowly. If you maybe only drink a liter of fluid now, just increase slowly. Don't all of a sudden drink 90 ounces of fluid. Increase a little each day. You could try using a water bottle that marks the different amounts on it, so you can kind of have an idea of how much you're actually drinking each day. And again, all fluid except for alcohol does not count toward your fluid intake, but everything else does. All right. I know that was kind of a handful. I don't know if anyone has any questions so far.
Yeah. In fact, there was a question that came through.
Okay.
Is it advisable to drink water with a meal?
Sure. Yeah. Or you don't have to. I don't think it really matters as long as you're getting the fluid in.
I suppose there might be some medical restriction, but I imagine the doctor would tell you that. But
exactly. The only thing I can think of is I know sometimes people have had like, bariatric surgery and their stomach can only hold so much at one time. So those people would not drink fluid with a meal. But for the regular population, I don't see why not, unless if you're someone who maybe gets full very easy and has a hard time eating enough, then you would want to have your fluid separate than your meals, just to allow more room in your stomach. Hope that helps.
That's a good answer. Yeah.
Any other questions? Nope. All right, I'll continue on. Let's see, where was I? There I was. Okay. Okay, so now we're on to dietary fiber. That's the second thing that can hopefully help with constipation. So fibers are just components of plant foods, carbohydrates, that are not digested and absorbed by our body. So they go intact, through our small intestine. They go into the large intestine, where some of them are fermented or digested by bacteria that live in our colon, while others just go on intact through the colon and are eliminated in our stool. And there's many different types of fiber, and they each, have different benefits, different types, and many foods have more than one type. And there's also different ways that fibers are classified. But for terms of our talk here and with our bowel, I'll classify them this way. So you have soluble fibers which dissolve in water. You have insoluble fibers which do not dissolve in water. We also, another characterization would be fermentable fibers, and these are readily metabolized by the colon microbiota, which is another word for bacteria, at which point they lose any water holding capability. So most soluble fibers are readily fermentable. And some insoluble fibers have some degree of fermentability. And whole foods likely have more than one type of fiber. So it's not just, food is not just all soluble fiber or all insoluble fiber. They often have different components in one food. And then fiber has many, I think I mentioned in some of our other presentations, fiber has many benefits to our body, but I'll just kind of talk for this about the effects of fiber on the colon. So fiber can provide bulking. So some types of fiber, they can increase stool water content and make stools bulky and soft and easier to pass. Other fibers may be from fermentation. Some fibers are fermented by the gut bacteria. And when this happens, they produce short chain fatty acids, which are just their fuel for the colon cells. And this also promotes a large population of good bacteria too. And while, fiber that's fermented may also increase the bulk of the stool by adding bacteria and short chain fatty acids, which kind of get eliminated with the stool sometimes. They get trapped in the stool and then that adds bulk in before they're eliminated. And then in terms of bowel regularity, a lot of the research done is done on isolated fibers. So this would be more like fiber supplements. There's not a lot of research on whole foods for effects on the colon. That research is kind of lacking. So there's a few mechanisms by which fiber can promote regularity and help prevent constipation. So we have soluble non-fermentable fibers. So those hold water and then they're not fermented by bacteria. These pass through the colon holding water, which increases the stool bulk and softness. An example of this is psyllium. And just to kind of emphasize here that if a fiber was soluble and fermentable, it would be fermented by the bacteria in the first half of the colon. So this would kind of nullify the water holding capabilities because that part of the fiber would be gone. It would be digested. So it wouldn't be, allowing the stool to hold water anymore. Another mechanism is by insoluble, poorly fermented fibers with large coarse fibers. So these pass through the colon intact. And the large coarse fibers, those irritate the colon wall, and this pulls in mucus and water. So that kind of helps soften the stool. And a few examples are wheat bran, cellulose, and lignin. There's unfortunately, some studies have shown that some fibers can be constipating. So wheat dextrin, that's a soluble fermentable fiber. And this is a common fiber supplement, and it's also used as a thickener. And studies have shown that it can increase constipation. So check your food labels, especially if you have, problems with constipation. Just check the food label for wheat dextrin and maybe try to eliminate those and see if that helps you at all. Another one is finely ground wheat bran. So this gets a little tricky because coarsely ground wheat bran promotes regularity, where finely ground wheat bran, that can be constipating. So this finely ground wheat bran is often used to enrich baked goods. And the really unfortunate thing is labels don't distinguish between fine and coarse wheat bran. So it can be pretty tricky, but I'm just kind of thinking that, if you're purchasing baked goods like wheat bran brand like muffins or baked goods from the store, those likely may have finely ground wheat bran. So maybe try to avoid those. Where I'm thinking more like cereals, breakfast cereals, those may be more likely to be coarse, large fibers. And of course, if you purchased your own wheat bran, you could kind of see on the package that it was large, coarse fibers. If you wanted to buy your own for bread or baking. So how much fiber should you have each day? So the dietary guidelines for fiber suggest that women have 25 grams a day, men 38 grams, or another formula is 14 grams a day for every 1,000 calories you consume. However, there is some research that has shown that 20 grams a day may be better for those with neurogenic bowel dysfunction. However, the evidence for this recommendation is weak, meaning that maybe these studies are poorly designed, they have an inferior design, or maybe they don't address certain fundamental questions. Maybe, maybe the people that had more fiber weren't drinking adequate fluid, so that could cause constipation. So the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, they recommend for neurogenic bowel starting at 15 grams a day of fiber and then slowly increasing to 30 grams a day. So find the amount that seems to work best for you, and be sure to drink plenty of water too and fluid, because if you increase your fiber intake without drinking enough fluid, that can cause constipation. So I have some examples of some of the fibers that we talked about with laxative effects. So that first one, the soluble non-fermentable source. The only really one out there like this is psyllium. Psyllium husk, it's a soluble fiber. It comes from the seeds of a shrub-like herb called Plantago ovata, and it's not found naturally in foods, but many foods are fortified with it. So let's see, so right here I have Metamucil, that's made with psyllium, that kind of fiber supplement you see, Metamucil. You could also do psyllium husk powder, which you could sprinkle on food or add to beverages. You could make recipes using psyllium husk powder. There's a couple fortified cereals I saw too. You have Kellogg's All Bran Buds and Nature's Path Smart Bran are fortified with psyllium. So that may be an option. And then I just kind of want to say too, before trying Metamucil or psyllium husk powder, just, ask your doctor, make sure it's okay. I can't think of any contraindications offhand, but, not knowing your medical background, it's probably best just to ask your doctor first before trying that. All right, and more, so cellulose. So that's another insoluble fiber that has laxative effects. Cellulose makes up the walls of plants. So we have all of these things that are good sources of cellulose and, would have a laxative effect, hopefully. So we have whole grain wheat, barley, oats, cereal, bulgur quinoa, cornmeal and brown rice, cabbage family of vegetables, arugula, bok choy, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, Swiss chard, turnips, watercress, some fruits, avocado, berries, apples and pears with the skins on, legumes, chickpeas, beans, lentils, nuts, potatoes with skins, and seeds with the hulls. So you got pumpkin, sunflower, chia seeds. With the hulls are just kind of that outside shell. So those all are good sources of cellulose. Lignin is another insoluble fiber. Some examples would be flaxseed, root vegetables like carrots, turnip, wheat bran, edible seeds like found in tomatoes or berries, vegetables with edible stems, broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, green beans, peaches, peas, Brazil nuts, and apples are all good sources. And wheat bran. So again, it's the coarse, large particles. Again, it's an insoluble fiber. Wheat bran cereal, so that Kellogg's All Bran, Nature's Path Smart Balance. And this Nature's Path Smart Balance, if you remember, that's also fortified with psyllium. So you have kind of two laxative effect like fibers in that cereal. You could purchase unprocessed or coarse wheat bran, and you could make your own bread or baked goods if you want. And again, I just put a little star down here just to, avoid packaged or store-bought brand baked goods that that may have fine ground wheat bran, because that can be constipating. So I put together a few tips to add some fiber to your diet. You could make your own trail mix with almonds and dried fruit. You could add pistachios and black beans to your salad. You could have lentil soup with a slice of whole grain bread. Try that Smart Brand cereal with strawberries. Make a root vegetable stew. Roast Brussels sprouts, have for a side with dinner. Have a sliced pear for a snack. Leave the skin on, and then leave the skin on your baked potato or baked sweet potato fries. Those are all some tips to increase your fiber. Physical activity. So this is another thing that maybe can help constipation. So it seems to help decrease the colonic transit time and constipation in the general population. So I don't know if this necessarily covers, carries over to people with neurological disorders or impairments or injuries or diseases, but it does seem to help in the general population. And again, that decreased colonic transit time means things are going to go through that large intestine faster. So the stool should hold on more water and be softer. The Paralyzed Veterans of America, they also have a recommendation that a standing program may facilitate bowel management in people who do not stand or walk regularly. I have some other tips for constipation. So you could try prune juice. So prune juice is high in sorbitol, which is a sugar alcohol, and this pulls water into the colon. It may cause diarrhea though, so be careful with it. Try just maybe 4 ounces a day or every other day, and make sure that you try it on a day. Maybe when you're going to be around the house, or there'll be someone there to help you if you need help. You could try your bowel regimen shortly after a meal, because that gastrocolic reflex that occurs, when the stomach is stretched after a meal, and that causes that mass movement of the colon, which gets things moving. Again, increase fiber slowly. So just increase by maybe, if you're not having too much fiber now, increase by just 5 grams a week up to 30 grams, and make sure you drink plenty of fluid. Reduce stress. Stress can cause constipation. You could try a meditation app. I like the meditation apps. All right. So next, neurogenic bowel dysfunction, diarrhea. So the goal.
Jen,
yes.
Is there going to be a good stopping point for you for questions? Because we have.
Yes. I think there's one in about 2 or 3 slides. Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I think I have 2 slides left, or 2 or 3, and then there's questions. Okay. So diarrhea. So the goal with this is we want to slow down that colonic transit time. So to slow things down, we want to avoid or limit caffeine. So caffeine can speed up peristalsis, which is one of those movements of the colon. So we want to kind of slow that down. So caffeine, want to avoid or limit that. Alcohol, also small amounts can speed up the movement of the colon. Also irritates the GI tract, which pulls water in. High sugar drinks, those pull water in. Same thing with sugar alcohols, sorbitol, mannitol, xylitol, lactitol, and isomalt. So check your food labels for that, especially if you're having problems with diarrhea. Prunes and prune juice you want to avoid if you're having diarrhea. Those again have sorbitol and will pull in water. High fat foods, those can trigger that gastrocolic reflex and make the mass movements occur. I think it's also been shown that as fat enters the beginning of the small intestine, that can trigger those reflexes as well. And you want to avoid, if you're having diarrhea, you want to avoid insoluble fiber because that irritates the GI tract and pulls water in. And you could look at all those foods that I mentioned on the previous slides and avoid those while you're having diarrhea. Also, try to avoid or limit stress if you can. Try to manage, your stress however you can, because that can increase diarrhea as well. So psyllium seems like a wonderful thing. It not only helps constipation, it also helps diarrhea. So like things like Metamucil and the psyllium husk powder, those could be taken or added to food or beverage, and that helps absorb some of that water and trap it in the stool, which will help maybe solidify it a little more than just being liquid. So that can help diarrhea. And again, with these 2 things, just ask your doctor first just to make sure there's no contraindications with your health history. Okay, let me unshare this so I can see everyone.
Okay. Okay, so one question was about Miralax, which is also something that I use. And
Okay.
is there, the person asking about it is concerned that it might be made up of digestible plastic. Any thoughts? It's,
I don't know, but I don't know that off the top of my head, but I do know that there was a study done when we're talking about, remember I mentioned how the insoluble fiber irritates the GI tract, and they did a study where, because I think at first they thought maybe it was holding on to water, but they had people swallow small pieces of plastic, and the small pieces of plastic improved constipation just like the insoluble fiber. So I don't know about the Miralax. I don't, would it say that on the label maybe? I don't know.
It's polyethylene glycol.
Okay.
So it's, I think, derived from the same things that plastic may be derived from, but I'm not a doctor, but I can tell you that my doctor told me to do it every day. And I've been doing it for years.
And it helps you.
Yeah, absolutely. It is an osmotic laxative. So it brings water into the colon.
Maybe it is like little pieces of plastic that irritate the GI system, just like the study I talked about.
And it's very gentle. So as opposed to, say, a stimulant laxative, I've also used the prunes and I've had a heck of a trip with my GI system since my spinal cord injury. And I'm 15 years out. So people at different ages, different number of years from their spinal cord injury are just, women, all of my friends who are in their early 50s, they're all having GI issues and they don't have spinal cord injury. So add a spinal cord injury and
to a complex situation already.
The prunes and the prune juice do work to a certain extent. The prunes take longer. And the prune juice can be in a couple hours. So
it's more concentrated.
Yeah, and I would start with a third of a cup first, see what happens.
Less than 4 ounces. Yep. Okay.
See what happens in an hour or two. And then if you really need to, have a blowout, you might get a third of a cup every hour and a half or 2 hours until something happens.
But it works fast. I haven't tried it myself. I'm always nervous to try it, but I do know we give it even to the patients in the hospital. We give them prune juice a lot. Some of the, the older patients, but they don't have, spinal cord injury or MS or, any other neurological type problems like that. But
so another question, Jen, what about flax seeds? I don't, if you, also grinding. I mean, I grind mine up like in a coffee grinder, but I wanted to see what
I think, that would be fun. Yeah, and that was listed under the one of the insoluble fibers that was good for. I think it had lignin in it, so I think that would be good. That would be good.
And then meditation apps. What apps can you?
My goodness. Which one I like? Which one do I do? Hold on.
I use Calm, and Calm
that's a good one,
has a free version and a paid version, and also
I gotta remember the name of mine. I got my phone right here, and of course I can't. Oh my goodness, I forgot how to use my
Insight phone. Timer is another one I use. It's free. Insight Timer is
Mine's free too. Mine is just called Meditation. I'll send a link to you and you can put it in the email.
Yeah. Headspace is another one, I think, too. They all have guided, you can do short guided meditation.
There's so many. I like them.
Abdominal massage, as because we can't always do physical activity. What do you?
I don't know about that. I know that when I was in the hospital, the nurses recommended that. And I also have a resource at the end that I'll share with everyone, the Paralyzed Veterans Association or Administration, I forget what it's called, but I included a huge document that they have that's geared toward, I think it's geared toward health providers, but it had a lot of information and it may mention something like that in there.
I have had experience with that too. It's basically following ascending, transverse, descending, just whoop, you know, doing
Okay.
sort of going like that, you know.
Yep.
So anyhow, all right, I'll stop.
Okay. Anything
I
else?
think that's it. I think that's
Okay.
it. Anybody else have anything?
Okay. I'll continue on. I'll wrap up our last third here. All right. Okay, let's see. So the gut microbiome, and this just refers to all of the bacteria in our gut. So most of the bacteria is in the large intestine. There is some, the small intestine does have some bacteria, but the majority is in the large. In the gut microbiome is referred to as the largest organ of immunity in the body. So we have trillions of gut bacteria, about 1,000 different species, and they're represented by 5,000 distinct bacterial strains. Everyone's gut microbiota, which I'll kind of use interchangeably with microbiome, is unique, but there are certain combinations and collections of bacteria that are found in healthy individuals. So the gut consists of microbes, bacteria that are both helpful and potentially harmful. So most are symbiotic, and this means where the host, which is the human body, and the microbiota, the bacteria, benefit. And in some smaller numbers are pathogenic, promoting disease. So you have some that are symbiotic and some are pathogenic. In a healthy body, the pathogenic and the symbiotic microbiota, so the harmful and the good, they coexist without really any problems. But sometimes if there's a disturbance in that balance, so maybe you have a infectious illness, maybe you have, neurovirus or traveler's diarrhea, or maybe a certain diet or prolonged use of antibiotics or another type of medication that destroys bacteria, dysbiosis can occur. And this stops these normal interactions of the balance between the good and harmful bacteria. So as a result, the body may become more susceptible to disease. So I like this little picture diagram. So this kind of shows that right up here is like the normal way that your large intestine is, the normal bacteria in there have a lot of nice good bacteria. Then something happens, maybe you have a stomach bug or a poor diet, or you're on antibiotics, and the number of these nice bacteria, they're reduced, and this makes way for imbalance. More of the harmful, the pathogenic bacteria start increasing. Then as time goes on, the pathogenic ones take over. So there's very few good ones left, a lot of pathogenic ones, then even more pathogenic bacteria. So this is the different degrees of that dysbiosis, that imbalance of the good and the bad bacteria. And dysbiosis is, it's associated with many diseases. So it's not yet proven to cause these diseases or disorders, but there is a relationship that research has shown. So this, imbalance is associated with cancer, autoimmune diseases, gas and bloating, diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome, heart disease, allergies, Alzheimer's, diarrhea, and constipation. So we want to have healthy gut microflora, which is just another word for microbiota. So what are the benefits to our health to have a nice balance of these good bacteria? So these healthy gut microflora, they prevent colonization by the pathogenic bacteria by acting as a barrier and by secreting antimicrobial substances. They promote the development of a stronger immune system. They synthesize essential vitamins like vitamin K and many of the B vitamins. They also synthesize neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, which are used by our brain. So this supports our mental health. They ferment undigested carbohydrates, which are another word for fiber. And when they do this, they produce short-chain fatty acids. And these short-chain fatty acids, they serve as an energy source for the cells of the colon and the cells of the liver. And there are specific short-chain fatty acids which reduce the risk of developing GI disorders, cancer, and cardiovascular disease. Oops. All right, so profile of a healthy gut. So healthy gut microflora, diversity is the key. So we want a diverse population of bacteria in our gut. And this allows the good bacteria to suppress the bad and protects against inflammation and disease. So when there is a high richness and diversity of the bacteria in your gut, your immune system is stronger and more stable. And while a decreased diversity is associated with disease. Probiotics, I think this is kind of a hot topic. I think a lot of people have heard of probiotics. So there's a specific definition to make something a probiotic. So probiotics are live bacteria and yeast that when they're administered in a viable form and in adequate amounts, they confer a scientifically substantiated health benefit. So this means that viable form means that they're presented in a way that they'll get through all of the hydrochloric acid in your stomach to make it to your through the small intestine into the colon, where they can be a benefit. Also, the dose has to be an adequate amount, and they have to confer a scientifically substantiated health benefit. This means that research has to have proven that they have a benefit to the host, which would be the human body's health. And typically probiotics, they do not take up residence in the gut after they're consumed. So many studies show that within a week or two of stopping probiotics, they're no longer isolated from the subject's stool. But this doesn't mean that they don't have a benefit just because they don't take up residence. So they're still able to travel through our GI tract, and they can interact with the human's immune system and with the microbes that already live in our gut or different parts of our body. And so you can kind of think of the commensal bacteria, the ones who are already in your gut, as the permanent residents, and probiotics more just like a travelers kind of passing through. So fermented foods. So some fermented foods contain probiotics, or some contain live active cultures. So fermented dairy, like yogurt and kefir. So these are fermented they have fermented live active cultures are added to them. In addition to this, some yogurt and kefir also have, I think it's mostly yogurt, have probiotics added to them. So not only do they have the live active cultures, but they have things, probiotics that are added. We also have foods that are fermented with inherent bacteria. So things like kimchi or the sauerkraut, these have bacteria, use the bacteria that are already on them, and they put it in a controlled environment to help ferment the food. So that's how sauerkraut's made. The bacteria that already lives on the cabbage is able to ferment and create sauerkraut. There's also some foods that are fermented, like sourdough bread, but then the beneficial bacteria die in cooking because of the high temperatures. And then also foods that are fermented with inherent bacteria, like the sauerkraut that I mentioned or kimchi, those are not probiotics because of the definition of probiotics, because it would be difficult to research to research the strain of bacteria and the amount and to prove that it has a scientifically substantiated health benefit. So it's more just because of the definition of probiotic. But I still think that these foods, these cultures in these foods do still have health benefits, even though they're not considered probiotic. But I think that the live active cultures in them are still helpful. So I have a list too of, yogurt, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, tempeh. You have cultured non-dairy yogurts too, and kombucha, which is a fermented tea. These all may have benefits to our health. So should you take a probiotic supplement? I think this is a big question a lot of people ask. So probiotics, they're disease and strain specific. So probiotics are studied, a certain strain is studied to see its effect on a certain disease. So before you take a probiotic, you have to ask yourself why Why am I taking this? What's the problem I'm trying to fix? And then once you know that, talk to your doctor and see what strain they recommend. Because like I said, certain strains work for, antibiotic associated diarrhea or traveler's diarrhea. So you just need to know why you're taking it and then find out what strain would work for that particular problem. So there are some factors that we can control that influence our gut microbiota diversity, because remember we talked about how diversity is the key to a healthy gut microbiota. So some external factors, stress and anxiety, medications like antibiotics and drugs, alcohol and tobacco, physical activity, and then of course diet. So what we eat can have a huge impact on our gut microbiota diversity. So a typical Western diet, which is low fiber, high protein, and high fat, that's associated with a monotonous and less diverse gut bacteria. Studies have also shown people who eat more fiber have a greater diversity in their gut microflora. So promoting a diverse gut microbiota. So we must provide fuel to these gut bacteria for them to thrive. So a variety of non-digestible plant food particles, which is another term for dietary fiber, these provide fuel to the gut bacteria and cause good bacteria to flourish, which represses the harmful bacteria. These same dietary fibers, they support a diverse population of good bacteria. In studies looking at the gut microbiota composition of vegans and vegetarians versus omnivores shows that those following plant-based diet have a more diverse and stable microbial makeup. There was also a study done that looked at 11,000 stool samples from people participating in the American Gut Project. And that study revealed that subjects who reported consuming a higher number of plants each week, over 30 different plant types, they had a greater fecal bacterial diversity than subjects that consumed a less diverse diet. So the more different types of plants you eat, the better for your gut bacteria. So we want to fuel those gut bacteria with plant foods. So you want to eat a wide variety of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and legumes. Good bacteria especially enjoy prebiotics. So prebiotics, those are defined as food for the beneficial microbes that live in our gut. So they provide health benefits for humans they selectively promote the growth of the beneficial bacteria. And prebiotics can be found naturally in food. They can also be they enrich a variety of food products, and they can be available as supplements too. And most prebiotics are dietary fibers, but not all dietary fibers have a prebiotic effect. So I just have a list here of some foods that are prebiotics. So garlic, onions, leeks, Jerusalem artichoke, shallots, asparagus, dandelion greens, barley, oats, apples, flaxseed, and wheat bran. I have some tips to help diversify your gut microbiota. So you could add some ground flaxseed and apples to your oatmeal. Add blueberries and banana to your yogurt. Flavor a veggie stir fry with onions and garlic. You could add roasted chickpeas and pepitas to your salad. Give it a little crunch. Try quinoa in your favorite protein bowl. You could add tempeh, which that's a fermented soy product. Could have a side of asparagus with your dinner. You could try kimchi with your eggs, or add sauerkraut to your avocado toast. Then just some advice just to kind of close up with. So make these changes slowly, and make changes one at a time so you can assess, you could find out what's working and maybe what's not working, and give your body enough time to assess the effects of the changes. So maybe about 3 to 5 bowel routine days, before making another change or looking at assessing that change that you made to see if it's effective or not. You could try keeping a journal too and tracking the food you've eaten and your fluid, as well as maybe bowel related problems or successes you've had. And I know this may be tough to see, and you'll get all of these slides. So you'll have a list of all the foods I mentioned, but this just kind of gives you a little idea of how much dietary fiber is in common foods that you may eat, just to kind of have an idea. And then some resources. So this is that large document I talked about, the management of neurogenic bowel dysfunction. This is geared toward people with spinal cord injury or their health providers. But there was a lot of information in here, not just diet, but all different, management programs for your bowel. Also, surgical options, all different things. It's just a wealth of information. This site, the International Scientific Association for Probiotics and Prebiotics. This site was fascinating, especially if you're interested in your gut health. They had so much information. They had videos. They talk about fermented foods. And they like it too because the site has information geared toward consumers, which would be, all of us. It also has information, maybe you want to get a little more technical. They have information geared toward health providers and even toward scientists. So wherever you fall on that spectrum of wanting, information, whether you want it simple or maybe more complex, they have it there. Another site, Gut Microbiota Watch, they have some information on gut health, digestion. They have information on diet supplements too, and review articles. So there's a lot of information there as well. All right, so questions? It's a lot of information.
Well, no one has written anything in the chat.
Okay.
I have a question though, and
okay.
Although I apologize ahead of time because it's very specific. I should have given you a heads up ahead of time so you would sound like you know everything about everything.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, but I didn't. So papaya, I've become, it's papaya season now, and it has something called, I don't know how to say it, papayan or papayan, or I don't know what syllable you put the emphasis on, but it's it's something that's supposed to be good for your digestion. I didn't know if you knew anything about it.
I don't. I can look it up though. I'll look it up and I'll send you my answer and you can send it to everyone else. I don't know about that at all, Liz.
Okay.
Sorry.
I wouldn't have really expected. That's a pretty esoteric sort of out there.
But I'll look it up and I'll let you know, and you can let everyone else know.
Does anybody else have any questions they want to voice out loud and come off mute? Well, one thing I wanted to point out also was that these free apps like MyFitnessPal, I used that when I was having significant GI problems. One of the things I used it for was to track my fiber because it will break it down for you. You don't have to figure it out.
Yeah.
And using stuff like Smart Brand, which I use, I mean, all you got to do is eat a half a cup of that. You've got like 15 grams of fiber. So, I mean, it knocks out in the early one little thing in the day, and you can, eat it. You're going to be eating it with milk or soy milk or almond milk or something. So you got your fluid. And just having something like that knocks out almost, a third to a half of your fiber helps you during the day to not feel stressed out about getting more fiber in. But then MyFitnessPal will track it all for you.
Yep.
And protein too.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point.
I was really impressed with MyFitnessPal. I've started it last week after our session a week ago, and it's really, really neat. I need to lose some weight, so that's kind of what we're following through on.
What did you say? I didn't hear the beginning of that. What did you use?
MyFitnessPal.
Oh, wonderful. Good. Yeah. I'm glad it's working for you. That's wonderful. I like to hear that.
I just wanted to make one comment about something you said in terms of probiotics. If you're not sure, ask your physician. Physicians know zero about nutrition. I'm sure you know that.
I know. I'm hoping that if you happen to have a GI a gastrointestinal doctor, they may know more about probiotics.
Absolutely, yes.
I think that they would be good at recommending. Yeah, you're right. Your general practitioner likely won't. Could also.
There is a probiotic that's being sold that I haven't used that's called Align, and at least my my primary care doctor was leaning me towards that because it's been developed by doctors, so that it's acidophilus and bifidus, which is usually the two strains that.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, Kathy, you're so right.
Yeah, I know. And you have to know too, but you have to know why you're taking the probiotic too. You know, like if you're just taking it for general health, I would just suggest, you know, trying to increase your, you know, your variety of fibrous foods would be, every study I've read, that's the greatest diversity in people's gut health is from different fibers, not really from taking a probiotic supplement, because those don't stay in your system anyways. They don't colonize your gut. They are helpful, but and I think, you know, eating a wide variety too, maybe the fermented foods can be helpful. But you know, if you have a specific reason you're taking the probiotic, then, you know, if you had, and a lot of things they haven't even really been proven to benefit the supplements in the research.
Well, for spinal cord injury, for me, I started taking a probiotic to help with UTIs, and
Did it help you?
Absolutely made a difference.
Good.
Yep.
More than even just like the vitamin C.
Oh, for sure. For UTIs, yes, it did. It was recommended to me. I did it, and it made a difference. I was doing things like cranberry juice and stuff like that, but I found this probiotic I stopped, you know, because you're trying to think of everything. Oh, I got to drink my cranberry juice, and then at lunch I'll do my prune juice, and then you know, holy cow, you know,
Trying to do everything.
So I haven't done the cranberry juice or the cranberry pills in forever, but you know, it's a trade-off. You may not want to take a probiotic pill. You may prefer to drink cranberry juice and go for it.
Yeah,
Well, I was talking about vitamin C. I think people get a lot of relief taking vitamin C every day, or it's a great preventive for UTIs.
I didn't know that.
I don't know about that either.
What was that?
Vitamin C.
Vitamin C.
Yeah, I don't know about that either. I would also suggest maybe checking out that if you were interested in probiotics and you feel like your, you know, doctor maybe didn't know that much, you could check out that website, the Gut Microbiota Watch. They have a lot of information and you know, they've reviewed a lot of supplements and the research. So that could be a good website with some valuable information.
Great. Well, thanks, Jen.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. This is really good.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Now, you all, we have one more of these classes next Wednesday, and that's going to be about healthy skin, which is important for everybody, and particularly people with paralysis who may have skin issues that come up. But I think Jen's going to touch on preventing and also treating pressure wounds or other kinds of skin things with nutrition, with what you're.
That's right. Yep.
What you're sticking in your pie hole. So I look forward to seeing everybody next week. And if you all have questions or suggestions or whatever, feel free to email, and then I will put the recording and the slides, make those available as I've been doing in the previous ones. Wait a minute, looks. I'm trying to see if there's a question I need to. I'm not sure I understand the question that, but you all email me and I will tell you whatever you need to know. Okay?
Okay. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you all next week. Thank you.